Is laboring with the Fantasy Grounds Academy. Join us for this weekend for Founders Day Weekend 8. I know that sounds kind of strange, but initially Founders Day was one day, and at one point we had enough people and enough traffic to warrant an entire weekend of events. So we kind of still kept that tradition, even though engagement has been lower. We do have some pretty awesome people that have been volunteering for quite some time. So we have people from all over the place. We have different people who like certain rule sets. We have people that are very talented. And I want to personally thank everyone who's stuck it out with me for all these years. So this is our 8th year. We actually went live in 2017 around the end of July. So that's when we established the Founders Day weekend. It was probably a little sooner than that. But essentially, the community that we've grown here together has been a life send for me and for those who are interested in playing online to reconnect with their family and friends and meet new people. So this community has been fairly positive throughout the years. I haven't had too many major issues. I mean, we've had a few things happen over the years, but this community is all volunteer. We're not part of Smiteworks directly or anything like that. However, they do recognize us, and they've been pretty good to us over the years. And my hat's off to Doug and John, and now Adam, for keeping things going and also improving the platform. So in the background right now, I'm looking at the new Cosmere Stormlight adventures and the rule set. So I'll be looking forward to maybe doing a preview of this in the near future. And I wanted to also mention that we have volunteers right now that are actually running some events. Earlier, we had someone that were setting up a game, and then in this case, I think we have a game running here, or perhaps character selection. And if you come into our community, there is a events. So if you go to the events on the top of the screen, it may look a little different for you depending on if you're on, on a cell phone app or perhaps Windows. And then also I have like an admin view. So essentially, there was an event earlier. Looks like we have a game tomorrow at 9 a.m. So Tales of the Valiant. And then we have another game at 10 a.m. that looks like it's pretty full. I think that's what's happening down here is they're setting up the characters and they're kind of getting that situated so they can play. But basically, that is a free game and usually pretty. I want to say they're very new user friendly, so no one's going to yell at you if you don't understand how to play or how to use Fantasy Grounds. And it looks like we have another one at 10:30 a.m. These are Pacific time, by the way. But when you come into our server, if you are already a member or you just joined, you look on top, you'll check out the events. They will show in your local time. So these are showing for me locally. But essentially, when you click on interested, if you want to participate or if you want to play, if you don't want to, or you find that your schedule changes, all you have to do is come back in and click on interested again, and that will remove you from the list. But yeah, so tomorrow we have a couple games, and I myself, it looks like actually we have a Stormwreck Isle tomorrow at later in the evening. So we have two events that are more EU friendly, and then at one I'm going to do an AI prompt text generation kind of like workshop. And then Starship Down is a rule set that basically was put together by Lord Entrals. He's testing it out, and it's not an official rule set, but he basically put it into Fantasy Grounds himself. And then we also on Sunday we have that was Sunday, but Walk This Way, step counter, and this is an extension to measure your steps and that sort of thing. In Fantasy Grounds, it's available on the Fantasy Grounds Forge. And then Sunday afternoon, going to be doing a kind of an AMA talk with our good friend Tankar there. We're going to be talking about, old school games like OSE and the BECMI, OSR, OSE, classic role playing games from the from the old TSR days. And we'll also be talking about mental health and gaming. So if you are someone who's interested in that kind of topic, we're going to be discussing that. And also on Sunday, Camberme is going to be running an event to basically help those understand layers and lighting for effects for the Fantasy Grounds map tools. He's going to use Starfinder as kind of like an intro to Starfinder, but even if you play a different rule set, you'll benefit from this because it'll talk about line of sight and how do you do the layering and that sort of thing. So it still apply. The map tools is fairly universal. How they apply to your game is kind of up to you, but it also is rather useful information regardless of what rule set you are. So come on in and join the events if you are so disposed of. And as of today, it is the 25th of July, 2025. So if you're watching this in the future, we're going to be running this until like Sunday evening. And depending on where you're at in the world, like I said, there's a few EU-friendly events that aren't too late. And then there's a couple that'll probably be too late for you. But nonetheless, I'm not sure. Australian time, maybe. Oceania. Depends on when you get up. It'll be kind of early for you. But nonetheless, so yes, we have a game tomorrow. We have actually 2 games tomorrow, 3 games tomorrow, and then we have 4 games. Wow. Okay. Well, it started off as 2, now it's 4. And then Sunday we have a few events. So if you guys are interested, you guys can join for free. But I wanted to get that out there and also thank the faculty, the volunteers, people that frequent our server and have for several years, have been with me for a long time. So I wanted to speak a little bit about the history of the Fantasy Grounds Academy. I don't want to bore you too much, but essentially we started in 2017. It was basically myself and a guy named Patty Juice, or we know him as Patty. I think he was in Scotland or Ireland, and he was my co-founder. We basically had our own Discord servers at the time, and we decided that we wanted to combine our servers because we both kind of had a group of players, and we wanted to show them the power of Fantasy Grounds and how to create characters and such. And back then, it was predominantly 5e. And then most of the other people were playing Call of Cthulhu, Pathfinder 1, that sort of thing. So that was kind of the thing back then. And that was in the upswing of the 5e rule set. And I wanted to say that I met Rob 2e early in those days, but our biggest and first supporter was Dave Middleton. So you guys know him as a digital DM. He's the one that gave us our first shout out, kind of, gave us the nod. And this is before he joined Smitework. So he was still a big streamer at the time, doing his own thing, kind of, putting Fantasy Grounds out there. And he's actually one of the inspirations for the Fantasy Grounds Academy, or back then we called it the college. But nonetheless, those two had joined us early on in our mission to basically show people how to use the platform, how to play using the platform, and also just building characters for like 2 years. So, during that time, we went through a lot of changes. A lot of people joined that had some skills, and they were actually a lot better at Discord than I was. And they helped me organize it to the point where we had probably, started off with maybe 30 people, and it grew from July to October, almost, I think, around 700 people. And then I want to say the following year we had like 4,000. I mean, it was huge growth. I mean, I don't have the numbers in front of me. I did some research earlier, but essentially from 2017 all the way up to COVID, and it was just the growth rate was phenomenal, and I imagine that Fantasy Grounds and Smiteworks grew quite a bit back then. So this was predominantly like 5e. I remember that Starfinder just came out, and that there was rumors that Pathfinder 2 was on the way, and it was a kind of a golden era, I would say, for a lot of the fans for 5e, and we had a lot of good content coming out. So Rob Toohey at the time made a whole bunch of effects for the 5e rule set, and they kind of dabbled in other stuff too, but basically his whole thing was to do that. He kind of partnered with us because we kind of used, I guess he used me for the people and also for the sales, but I also used him for getting us out on the map, and so we kind of had a mutual usury there. So Rob and I had a pretty good relationship. I mean, we didn't always see eye to eye. He can be pretty curmudgeon-y, but he was one of the integral people, a contributor. And I remember when he was more active in our community, he used to give out free DM's Guild modules because everything was on the DM's Guild at the time. This is before the Forge. And that was kind of a fun ride. I mean, I met Rob in person a couple times, because he had to come to the Seattle area where I live, and we met a couple times. We had dinner and such. And one of those two trips, we actually met Moon Wizard or John Gregory, the co-owner of Smiteworks of Fantasy Grounds. And this was probably about a year before Unity came out. So, of course, we were drilling him we had a nice steak dinner, but we were grilling him about upcoming changes and stuff. And I remember I asked him about fonts, and I know that topic comes up all the time, or at least once or twice a year, with changing the fonts in Fantasy Grounds. I know the answer now is probably not, but if you've ever played Fantasy Grounds, sometimes depending on how you scale it, the font size can change and kind of get difficult sometimes, especially if you're like on a small computer. So anyways, Moon Wizard said no, it's not going to change, guys. Sorry about that. And then we were asking him some other questions about Unity before it came out. He didn't give us too much. I mean, he pretty much stuck to his guns. He didn't want to give us information that may or may not have been true at the time. But I do remember talking to John about that. He's pretty nice, and we had a nice steak dinner at, I think it was like a Ruth Chris steakhouse or something like that in Bellevue. And we just had just kind of hung out for about an hour or so. And then Rob came out another time, and we went to, I think he actually went on the Wizards of the Coast show, and he and I met up after that, and he basically we had dinner at Panera. We did like a kind of a semi-live thing, and then he and I did the All Things Fantasy Grounds show for a few years. I didn't stay with the show for the whole time because I got too busy with real life and then the Fantasy Grounds Academy. So I kind of deferred to other people and give them a chance to be on the show. And so we had Furied Fate, Robin. We've had a lot of guests on that show. Did mostly community members. I think, did we ever get Doug or anyone like that? I don't remember if we got Doug or not, but that show was pretty strong for a couple of years. I mean, we didn't have a big, huge following, and not everyone liked Rob Toohey's style, but we did showcase some pretty cool stuff. And this was like back then, it was cutting edge. This was like the cool stuff, and unfortunately, it was all for 5e pretty much. But we did try to branch out with some other rule sets, but not very often. I mean, it was pretty much a 5e show, and that was one of the small, I won't say I regret it, but I kind of wished we had more diversification. But back then, I mean, that was the popular thing. That was the thing to have. Now that's changed quite a bit. There's a whole spread of different rule sets out, and I think Rob, when he passed, I don't think he actually got to see it, but he probably would have rolled in his grave a couple times, but to see what's been going on lately. But same with I know that Digital Dave or the Digital DM, he wanted more rule sets. He tried, like he did Pathfinder, and he did a lot of stuff for like Seven Seas and such. But again, I mean, he had to go back to 5e quite a bit, even though he wanted to change it up some. So, and then he started working for Smiteworks, so that was, something that kind of comes with the territory for marketing and for, that sort of thing. So I imagine that the digital DM would be kind of happy now if he was still with us. He'd probably look at all the different available rule sets now and be pretty happy. And he'd also realize that 5e is not the big deal anymore. It's kind of on its way out, or maybe it's neutralized, but nonetheless, things are changing for sure. Um, COVID definitely changed the landscape. I know that we grew up to almost 10,000 members, and I don't know what the actual end number was. It was like, 10 and some change, like almost 11,000 members. Now, mind you, probably 5% of those were fake accounts, spam bots, duplicate accounts, that sort of thing. But we had about 10 grand at one time. And, of course, people change and people's opinions change. So we had some struggles. We had people leaving, and there was a rivalry at one point between Rob's Publishing and Grim Press, I think was one of the things. I don't think it was a big rivalry, but I know there was some, feelings and people were kind of siding at the time. And I remember we had like not everything was perfect. Like we had like a Pathfinder versus D&D kind of schism. And then of course I've had issues with different members who were very passionate about the game and Fantasy Grounds, but they just clashed, so we had those sort of things. So after a while, the community kind of plateaued, and we had less engagement and less people showing up to events. So at this current moment, we have about 6,500 guests or excuse me, members, but that was after a purge that I had done after COVID, because I knew that the 10,000 number, that number didn't sound right. So I did a purge and it got rid of like 3 or 4,000 members. So they either left or they were fake accounts or whatever the mix is in that. But now we're about 6 grand, and we have quite a few volunteers still around from the early days when we were called. Well, first I was going to call it the D&D Church, or the D&D 5e Church, because it was on Sundays, and every other Sunday I was showing people how to use Fantasy Grounds, mainly character creation. And I always thought that was the key to Fantasy Grounds, was character creation, and I still believe that, is that without knowing how to build a decent character, or at least most of the way correct, it really put a lot of burden on the game master. And that's kind of why I spent those 2 or 3 years in the beginning just going through character creation. We even created a curriculum, like our own instruction manuals for that. We had training guides. We had a bunch of volunteers. I think we had up to 30 faculty members at one time, and like 4 monitors, and are the people that were basically making sure things were kosher. And then we made a lot of changes. We tried to host games, but I was always against it, only because I didn't want the inner fighting and the same 5 people getting to play and then the rest of the people couldn't. So it was kind of a catch-22 double-edged sword. Like you provide games, but it's only good for 50 people out of thousands, and then or don't provide games and people go elsewhere. So I picked the latter. Sometimes I regret that, sometimes not. Now, this wasn't a one-time thing. Like, we tried it a few times and we had mixed results. Like, the first time we did it was pretty good, but then we had some weird thing happen and we shut it down. And I tried it again, and then no one was showing up for games. They were already, established in their other places. And then I considered it a third time, and then I think I had someone who wanted to monetize it. This is before Start Playing and all that stuff came out. And I didn't really ever want paid games in the free Fantasy Grounds Academy. I thought that would kind of ruin it. And then we even tried to allow for the community members to advertise their content. So if they had stuff on the DM's Guild, or if they had stuff on the Fantasy Grounds store, or that sort of thing, we had a channel where they could post links to their products, and it would go right to wherever they were selling. The problem with that was that people were getting competitive, and whenever someone posted a new product, then another person would post, and the last person would post again, and it just became like a posting war to be on top of the scrolling list. So we got rid of that because it was overly competitive, and again, it kind of messed with the ecology and the free type thing, and a lot of people were wondering why they couldn't put their stuff up, and it wasn't even related to Fantasy Grounds. I mean, it was role-playing game products, but it's like some guy was making like wooden shoe boxes or something, and it was just fantasy themed or whatever. But so basically we kind of went through a lot of different phases, and what we found is just keeping it simple, and that other people can host their own events and their own games when it comes to that. So we kind of never really got heavy into the games, even though we're trying to teach people how to play games. Kind of conundrum. Like, we show people how to use, how to build, all those things, but we don't provide any games. That's kind of ridiculous, but it's just the way our ecology evolved, and how we started. But basically, we've kind of kept to that. So we kind of end up now, we're kind of more like a resource, and we do provide classes, but we used to have like regularly scheduled classes, like every week we had a couple classes. But now what we've done is we have a Fantasy Grounds class request. It's still kind of active here. So basically, people come in, and if they really want something, some kind of help, then they can, request here, and we'll get someone to try to help them if we have someone available. But we used to have a whole website with a planner and a bunch of different people teaching stuff. But after a while, people just stopped showing up. A couple of years ago, I used to still try to do the the GM classes and the player character creation classes, and it just became less and less important, or people just wouldn't show up. I'd have like 7 people sign up, and only like 1 or 2 people would show. So after a while, we decided to go to the request thing, because it was basically the downturn in the 5e rule set. Obviously OGL stuff and all that hoopla, but then also it was post COVID. And then, once you throw in that OGL mess, and you got everyone scattered all over the role playing game uh, ecology, or the community, it just kind of made everything really flat, and the engagement just went down. And this isn't just here. I mean, this impacted the entire industry. So, but back to some positive things. Some of the things I'm really proud of is that, one, kind of a selfish thing. Obviously, I don't know if I ever said this. Maybe I did a long time ago. But one of the selfish reasons that I had thought about this Fantasy Grounds Academy, or back then college, was that I wanted to make sure I had people I could play with later. So I'm looking forward to that. So maybe in our 10th year, I'll hang my hat up or something, or pass it down to someone else to take it over. But I'm looking forward to playing some games with people, and hopefully they're people that have gone through, or that were inspired by some of our videos, because I still do quite a few videos on YouTube and Twitch. I do 1 or 2 a week now. I was going up to like 3 a week, but it just gets to be too much. And people want me to edit the videos, and they yell at me, and it just sometimes it just isn't worth it. Other times I just really like to show people what Fantasy Grounds can do, or look at new rule sets. So for example, today I'm looking at the Cosmere. So this looks pretty good. I like the theme. I believe that Adam Bradford did this, and I think he helped get the rule set. But right now, I have a starter adventure, and then I have the handbook. But there's a world book, and there's like a large adventure, and then there's like a first level adventure available. And I think all in all, if I put everything all in the basket, it was like $100 or something like that. But I only just got the core book and the starter adventure for now, because I still kind of want to see how the rule set is before I dive in. So that's one thing to know about Fantasy Grounds is you don't necessarily have to go out and buy everything at once. And as a matter of fact, I'll probably wait until there's a sale to get the rest of it if I'm interested. So that's something I do like about Fantasy Grounds is you're not necessarily locked in. If you buy the $50 license, which at one time was $150, it's a steal. I mean, you're getting the platform. Some rules are included, but not a lot. Just like SRD or basic stuff, depending on the rule set and the licensing. But for instance, like this Cosmere one, you don't get the rule set unless you purchased the rule set. So there's some rule sets like that, like Alien, and there's some other things that are licensed that way. Whereas like 5e, you get basic rule set, you get the Fantasy Grounds functionality, and then you get the SRD, that sort of thing. But not all rule sets are equal. So, but yeah, I'm really proud of also the things that we had accomplished as a community. So I think honestly, if I went back and did the research, which would take a long time, we've created a ton of curriculum which is outdated, but most of it's still pretty valid, to be honest. And then we had a lot of really cool guests. So I mean, we had we've had Doug on a few times. We had the Digital Dave. We had him on a couple times. And I don't know if you guys remember Lady Shell, but she was like a partner for me. I wouldn't say she was a secretary, but basically she helped me behind the scenes quite a bit. And she passed away a year or two ago, and I really regret not being able to say goodbye to her. But she basically did a lot behind the scenes, and I'm not comfortable saying this, but I'll tell you right now that she kind of helped me and my family financially during the COVID time. And, I can't say that. I mean, I didn't think we were taking advantage of her, but at the same time, I felt kind of guilty because, here she was handing us this money. Now, what I found out later was, it came with a hitch, and I kind of got myself in trouble with that. So I'm kind of ashamed of that. But at the same time, I'm not, because I think it went to a good cause. She helped me get the Unity license early so that we can continue teaching people when Fantasy Grounds Unity came out. Rob was pretty good to us for a long time. And then, of course, Lady Shell actually went to do conversions with Grim Press. She only did a couple, though, I think, and then she kind of got burned out. And I don't know, she died from health issues or something like that, but she's another person I kind of miss. So her and Rob and Digital DM definitely, I always remember them, and I appreciate their support and their help. And I really thought that without them, we wouldn't be where we're at now. And also the volunteers that we have now that stuck around, they definitely, you know, they they they've kind of made this what it is now. So anyhow, the other thing is, we had like Andrew Gaska, we had Seth Skorkowski, we've had Paizo, we had Frog God Games. I had Keith Amon, the author who wrote The Monsters Know What They're Doing. I believe we had a bunch of other really cool industry guests over the years. We used to invite them to Founders Day, but the engagement hasn't been as high as it was in the past. So I didn't get any headliners, but also I'm proud of that we had 3 different Mappers Delight events in a 6-year period. So, and Mappers Delight 1, 2, and 3, a couple years apart. Those are still on our YouTube channel, but basically we had a bunch of digital cartographers showcasing their work and how, that sort of thing. We're also guests on Nerdarchy. I think we did a podcast. I don't remember what the podcast was Forgive me for that. It's been a while. And then, we did a lot of good things over these years with Fantasy Grounds, with the community, and we started expanding out into, other communities and getting other people to play and try Fantasy Grounds. I remember when the streaming community was big, Fantasy Grounds was still kind of, um, I want to say most people at the time were using Roll20. So that was a thing that I was hoping at the time that more people would use Fantasy Grounds, and they started to actually. And then when Unity came out, I don't know if it scared people away or the change was too dry. I don't know what happened, but basically, the people who knew Fantasy Grounds Classic sort of kind of faded away a little bit, and not all of them, but a certain amount of them. And then the Unity thing was kind of a it still is a work in progress. So I think in the early days it was kind of rough. So maybe that's one of the things that people weren't grasping at the time. They weren't digging it. So it had to be changed, but nonetheless. So anyways, Fantasy Grounds is a pretty cool program. And through that, I've met a lot of really good people, and a lot of good people have supported me, and everyone has supported each other. And I think it's been a pretty decent ride. And I don't regret anything, to be honest. I mean, I've put in 8 years, and I'm really looking forward to the golden years, I guess. So I'm thinking maybe in the future I'll start actually putting out content, doing Kickstarters or something, because I've been working on it for a long time, and I do plan on holding on to Fantasy Grounds as long as they're around. But I think I'm getting into writing and making content, and done a lot of research with AI tools lately in the last couple of years. And then I've also been kind of reading and looking where the industry's going. And I think that if my hunch is right, I think that there's some big changes on the horizon. So anyhow, hopefully you guys can participate. Like I said, there's a few games, couple events. I'm gonna do an AI thing tomorrow, and there's like 3 or 4 games tomorrow, and then there's a couple events on Sunday. And I'm going to be talking to Tankar's Tavern, which it will be old school essentials, OSR, Osric, or whatever you want to call it, and then the BECMI stuff. And also, I want to mention Boffrin, who kind of helped me arrange that. He's been trying to get me to get Tankar involved for a while. And also Camberme, who's been kind of my right hand man lately, last few years. He's kind of, I guess, sort of taken my place, if you want to look at it that way. He's been running most of the classes and stuff. I need to get back to that, but I started a new job in December, so my time is very limited and very tiring job. But nonetheless, it's good to have a job again. And then obviously changes around the house and that sort of thing. And then the other thing I wanted to mention was that Smiteworks has been pretty good to us, and everyone involved with the role-playing game community has been pretty decent to us. We had Ben Looms from Sirenscape a couple years ago. We had some community developers who were, working with sound. So we had a bunch of sound folks on that were doing audio. And then we also had token makers. So people who are making tokens, like Devin Knight and that sort of things. And, of course, we have Zacchaeus. You guys know who he is. He does a lot of the 5e conversions. He's done other work too, but basically that's his main forte was that. But nonetheless, the engagement is definitely a lot lower than it has been in the past. And unfortunately, there's not much we can do about it. Just kind of keep looking forward and hopefully keep this effort going. We do have Patreon and donation stuff, but generally speaking, the Fantasy Grounds Academy has been blessed by some really good people. And I will admit, I have leveraged the community in need. So I lost vision in my right eye, I got swamped with bills, and I'm not saying no one else has problems, but basically I did a couple of those, what are they, GoFundMes, and the community rallied behind me, and I was really deeply impressed by how that happened. And it's not something you want to take advantage of. You do that when it's a real emergency and not a money grab. And the other thing is that it never really was about money, but our Patreon, I use the money for that to pay for the website, which is around 300 or 400 bucks a month or a year, and then the domain name and the some of our like keeping fantasy grounds, getting new rule sets, and also just basic expenses like I guess I have subscriptions for tools that I use to produce content and that sort of thing. So that's where most of that money goes. I don't really pocket that. And I could ask Doug to probably or Smiteworks to give me free rule sets, and they have. They've asked me if I needed anything before in the past, and I took them up on it. I've even reached out to them a couple times, said, "Hey, do you mind, fronting me this so I can showcase it?" And they were good about it. And once the traffic started dying down and the community started kind of changing, I don't ask them for stuff because one, I know they're not making a bunch of money, and sometimes you give a little, take a little, give back, so. Now I don't bother them with, asking for freebies. I used to ask for licenses occasionally for giveaways and that sort of thing, but now I don't bother with that. Not we'll wait till another upswing and then maybe I'll hit them up, but they've been pretty good to me and I can't complain about that. And everyone has, to be honest. I can't think of one person that's really like made me want to quit. Although there was a couple times where I did want to shut down the academy, but a lot of it was my own doing. A lot of it is making problems for yourself, and that's not much anyone else but myself can do about that. I do want to say one of the things that really got me into this fantasy grounds and getting back into role playing games was at that point before I started the Fantasy Grounds Academy. I was kind of having a mental breakdown, midlife crisis kind of thing, and then I had really bad PTSD and mental issues, and I started getting back into role playing games because that's what I did when I was younger, and it kind of helped me through this. And I remember first starting to play Fantasy Grounds, it did really frustrate me, and I tried to run a game, and it just I didn't understand it. And instead of making a big stink about it and being a troll and posting all this negative stuff, I just decided, okay, well, if I can't figure it out, I'll get some people together and we'll figure it out together. And, instead of worrying about what it can't do, I started focusing more on what you can do with it. And even though this may sound cliche and maybe a little insensitive, but I think that if you control Fantasy Grounds and don't let it control you. I know that sounds kind of maybe sound like BS, but I learned that if you kind of get into it and put some time into it, you're going to get some out of it. I think a lot of people quit and they just can't handle it, or they just don't want to put the time into it. And that's really what the thing is putting time into it. And I think that's the most valuable commodity out there right now in any role playing game. So if you're like even if you're using Foundry or anything like that, there's still a lot of stuff you got to go through, a lot of hoops, a lot of changes, and heartaches and all kinds of stuff. But you get extensions or modules, and they crash or they're not compatible anymore, and so you go through all that, and that's part of the ecology of using a virtual tabletop. It's just part of the game. And the whole thing that I noticed is, I hate to say this, but less is more. So the less crap you got going on, the easier it is to master Fantasy Grounds. If you start adding too much stuff at once, and I went through this too, I was adding mods, extensions is when they first started. I was really starting to add those in, and then having like 20 books and huge gigantic maps, and I just kind of went all out. I got like hundreds of tokens, and it's like didn't really need all that. I still haven't even looked at half of that stuff. So, buy the things you'll use, and actually take the time if you can to look at what you have, and you make the best of it, because it really is about you and how you're going to use it to present it to your table, whether it be face to face, online, or maybe you just do it to collect. I mean, at one point I said, I'm just a Fantasy Grounds collector, because I was buying stuff left and right. I didn't even need half the stuff. So I'm a little embarrassed about that, but it's a hobby that I'm really passionate about. And I don't know if any other hobby I have comes closest, other than music. I think music's my second biggest hobby, money suck, time suck. So I might get back into music, because I've kind of been playing around with it lately. So it takes a lot of time. So that's a whole nother thing with software and updates and getting the right computer specs, and it's all this stuff could be overwhelming, because you're fighting technology, you're fighting security from your computers or an online portal, and then you're fighting with Fantasy Grounds, and you're fighting with all the stuff you've added to it, and it gets to the point where it can get very exhausting. So my advice, overall, depending on your experience level and how much time you have, is the time you put into it is basically what you're going to get out of it. And this solid 8 years of Fantasy Grounds has taught me the tough lesson of less is more. And it sounds so cliche and kind of stupid, but it's true. You just don't need 100,000 tokens. It's like, I get this stuff because I think, well, I might need this. But to be honest with you, I haven't even scratched the surface of what I've invested in. So, stick to a couple rule sets and get good at them, and then make stuff for that rule set, and maybe even put it up on the Fantasy Grounds Forge. I think that's a better avenue. But some of us, like myself, like to collect, and oh, I gotta have this new rule set, or I gotta have this token collection. So that's just part of being a hoarder and a role-playing game fanatic. But I used to do that with the books, so it's not new to me. I used to go out and buy all the books, all the box sets. I had so much stuff at one point that it cluttered my apartment. It was in the early 90s, late 80s. My girlfriend threatened to leave me because I had too many role-playing game things. So maybe I didn't buy her a diamond ring quick enough, but a lot of my money and time went into role-playing games, and I think a lot of that was dealing with trauma, PTSD, stress, and that's what I used role-playing games for. So we're going to have that topic with Tenkar's Tavern this Sunday. So we'll talk about this PTSD and all that sort of things. We had people who had come through and had lots of mental issues, and they found their virtual tabletop to kind of help them through some of that. And I think role-playing games are good for that, for trauma, PTSD, and getting to meet people and all that kind of stuff. So there's some therapeutic, cathartic stuff about role-playing games that I don't regret at all. And I try to get my kids into it, but they're video game kids, so they never really embraced it, and I didn't force it on them either. So that's the thing. They respect me and they got my boundaries, but and I really have to respect Sonia, my missus there, for putting up with me for all these years with all my role-playing game stuff, and putting her off and stuff to help people learn how to use the platform. And that's something that it's a trade-off, and I think it kind of helped me, though, personally, get through a lot of things. I'm not saying I'm healed. I'm not 100%, but I'm a lot better than I was before I started. So hats off to all of you in the community. I'm really grateful for, like I said, for all the people who have supported the Fantasy Grounds Academy, and for the volunteers. That without them, it wouldn't be what it is now. and I might be looking for a successor. And I got a couple people in mind, and maybe in a couple years I might hang up my hat. I think 10 years is enough. I'm getting to the point. I'm getting old. I think I'm 54 now. I think it'd be a good time to start doing some other things and taking a look around what's going on around me. But yeah, put my head down for 8 years so far. We'll see. I don't know. I'm not giving up, but if I do, I have some good people behind me that are probably better than I am now at the platform, which is kind of what my ultimate goal was. Is I want people who know how to use it, so I can play with them. I don't want to have to spend hours setting up and all that. I want to just get on there, connect, and play. And I think that's what we all want. And sometimes we make boundaries or we create more problems than it's worth. But anyhow, happy Founders Day 8 to all of you. If you're watching this in the future, the links will be in the video description, or you just look for Fantasy Grounds Academy. You'll find our website or our Discord link. We're all over the place. So I appreciate all of you. Love you all. And you guys enjoy your weekend, and I'll see you around. Bye-bye.